Welcome back to the program. London's first Muslim mayor spent his first day in office today at a Holocaust memorial event. Sadiq Khan, the son of Pakistani immigrants whose father was a bus driver and whose mother was a seamstress, says that he is a unifier. The inclusive language, which is a far cry from US presidential candidate Donald Trump's rhetoric across the pond. Representative André Carson is only the second Muslim ever elected to the US Congress, and he joins me now from Indiana. Representative Congressman Carson, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So let me just ask you, what did you think? And I know you tweeted your congratulations, but were you as amazed as everybody else that actually Sadiq Khan was elected first Muslim mayor of London?
Well, I think it speaks to the political sense, the multiculturalism of the great city of London. I was there quite recently, and the people are phenomenal. So I think it speaks to London being a global city, and I'm very pleased, and I congratulate the mayor-elect.
What does it say about the campaigns? I first want to ask you about that because it turned into a rather nasty campaign. All sorts of aspersions were cast against his faith. He was called dangerous by his opponent. And as you see what's happening simultaneously in the United States, Donald Trump, who won your state in the Republican primary a few days ago, has also raised the specter of anti-Islam. How do you read these politics today?
Well, I think we're living in a time where xenophobia and Islamophobia are certainly on the rise. But having said that, there are scores of people in places like Indiana and across America and even in the UK who understand that Muslims are a fabric of our societies, that they play an important role. There are deep levels of bigotry, in many cases acted out by the governmental apparatus. And so Mayor-elect Khan's election has great symbolic value, and it has substantive value. I mean, he's very qualified for the job as a former minister and as someone who is certainly accomplished. But I say that his background, coming from public housing, and having worked hard, coming from a hard-working South Asian family, I think he speaks and represents all that is great and all that is yet to come from the Muslim community.
And in fact, you have written and you've talked about how in one of the great sort of existential fights of our time right now, which is against terrorism, radicalization, the threat within, that you cannot do it without having the Muslim faith on board and engaged.
Precisely. I mean, every day, from whether it's MI5, MI6, the CIA, NSA, and our global international network, even our Five Eye partners, it is very clear that a lot of attempted attacks are thwarted simply because there are Muslims who are in these agencies, but there are also Muslims who are providing information who are deeply concerned about creating and maintaining safe spaces.
Let me ask you about your story, because you were a convert to Islam, I believe, as a teenager. And why did that happen? Why did you decide to do that? And then you went into law enforcement, of all things.
Well, you know, it was a part of a spiritual journey that I took. I studied. I grew up in a Baptist family. I went to a Catholic school. I was an altar boy. It was my conversations with different pastors and even priests and other faith leaders that forced me to really study different faith systems, be it Christianity, Judaism, Islam, many mystical schools and systems and schools of thought and different philosophical schools of thought that brought me to this place. I also saw a heavy presence of Muslims in my community pushing back on crime and doing the job that law enforcement refused to do or simply were incapable of doing. And I had my own negative experiences with law enforcement, having been arrested as a young man at the age of 17 in juvenile, and the charges, I was in charge ultimately, but having that experience propelled me to want to be a part of the solution. And for me, that was becoming a part of a law enforcement organization, the Indiana State Excise Police. I then went on to work for the Indiana Department of Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. And now I sit on the House Intelligence Committee. So my commitment of having knowing both sides of the aisle, from seeing excess as it relates to law enforcement and being on the other side of the aisle where we can help keep people safer. And I think that's an important balance to have.
So when you were running for election, did people look at your faith or your experience?
Well, a bit of both. For many, they accuse me of being a Trojan horse or some kind of sleeper cell. For others, my background as a police officer, starting as a special deputy with the Marion County Sheriff's Department, on to the State Excise Police and Indiana Department of Homeland Security, helped to offset any notion that I posed a threat. I'm homegrown from Indianapolis, Indiana. So many people knew that, but I still get a considerable amount of death threats, also accusations from opponents that I'm somehow a terrorist simply because I choose to practice Islam. And I think now society must change. The more it becomes accepting of Muslims, the more Muslims are free, who are very qualified to participate in the political process. And we're seeing more of that. We have, of course, Congressman Keith Ellison. My father-in-law was the first elected Muslim judge, Judge David Shahid. We have Muslims in our general assemblies, more on city councils. We have had mayors of small towns. And I think that Mayor-elect Khan's symbolism is an inspiration to Muslims, not only in the UK, but Muslims in America and across the globe.
Donald Trump is very divisive when it comes to American Muslims and Muslims in general. Do you think the people, the voters of the United States come November are going to fall victim to those divisive politics? Or will they, like the Londoners, look at the candidates for who they are?
Well, Londoners are like Americans in that we value democracy. We certainly value sovereignty, but we understand that we live in a pluralistic and multicultural society. I think that Mr. Trump, who's a great showman, I've said over and over again, I've read most of his books. I've even met Mr. Trump. I have found his rhetoric to not be compatible with who he is personally. And so he has made a choice to present this image and to be wedded to this kind of rhetoric that I think and know it's divisive. And the American people have proven over and over and over again, especially in modern times, that we are against any forms of discrimination and bigotry when we are given an opportunity to participate in the political process without hindrance, without the kinds of voter suppression tactics that we're seeing even in parts of our own country. When we're given the kind of opportunity to participate in the democratic process in the past 10 to 20 years, we will push back against any form of bigotry or extremism.
On that note, Congressman André Carson, thank you very much for joining us from Indiana this evening. Thanks so much.